Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 5th meeting of the New York State Independent Redistricting Commission. Happy New Year, or as I saw on Twitter, Happy Redistricting Year. Very good to see everyone today. First on our agenda is an update from our executive directors concerning funding and the budget. So Karen and Doug, if you could provide us with an update.
Sure. We have been in contact with the Department of State and the SUNY Research Foundation. They are working on a contract, and Karen and I are both supplying SUNY Research Foundation with a $1 million budget for the $1 million appropriation that exists currently. And in turn, we are also going to formally request from the Division of Budget additional funding for the commission. We have called and we have not had return phone calls, so we're going to formally request it in writing.
Karen, is there anything else you want to add on that?
No, just that the contract is still being worked out. We haven't seen a draft yet. And once the terms are negotiated, you'll see a draft contract.
Okay. Commissioner Wofford, do you want to weigh in on this? Yeah.
Two questions. Just by point of clarification for Co-Executive Director Black, the negotiation you referred to is between the Department of State and the Research Foundation?
Correct.
Okay. Not us. Okay.
That's correct. But we will see a draft.
Second question is for Co-Executive Director Brickell. Is it your understanding that the prior pronouncements of the commission give you and Co-Executive Director Blatt sufficient authority to submit a number, or at least a formal request with a number to the Division of Budget for the governor's executive submission? Or do you believe that any further action from the commission is required?
I believe since we've been appointed, we should be able to do that, but I don't think it would hurt if the commission were to, empower us somehow. If there is a question, maybe that could take place. I'm not. That's your call.
Would you prefer a letter or a resolution passed today? What would be best for you?
I think we should have a resolution authorizing them to send a letter to the Division of the Budget. So that request in writing. I would urge.
So moved.
So, yeah, George, can you just enunciate precisely what you want, just so we know what we're voting on?
Resolve that the commission do hereby direct and authorize the executive directors to submit in writing to the Division of the Budget the requested budget appropriation for the executive conclusion.
Moved by Commissioner Wofford, seconded by Commissioner
for the next fiscal year.
Correct.
Okay.
That should
So
be, yeah.
moved by Commissioner Wofford, seconded by Commissioner Flateau. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, passes unanimously.
On that, along that same line, executive directors, do you need a similar mandate with respect to the current fiscal year? You mentioned the current appropriations we're trying to lock down. We still do have 90 days in the current fiscal year worth of work we have to get done. Onboarding our two illustrious.
Based on our conversations with both Department of State and the Research Foundation, I don't think so. They need from us the scope of work and budget for that $1 million appropriation that does exist. So there is an understanding between Department of State and the Research Foundation that that appropriation will be a part. That's why we have to submit them the $1 million budget.
Okay.
Commissioner Frazier, you're on mute. Commissioner Frazier.
Is that better?
Okay, yes.
Okay, now we can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good. How soon do you need this from us? Did they give you a timeline?
It's actually from us to them. You're talking about the Research Foundation?
No, how, okay, there are three entities here. There's the commission, they're represented by you in this conversation. There's the Research Foundation, and there's Division of Budget, and there's the Department of State. First question, if I understand what you said, someone, any of those other three parties, is looking for a document from us that is a scope of work that spends the appropriation that is on the books for the remaining portion of this fiscal year. Am I correct?
Correct.
It is actually a $1 million grant that is going to the Research Foundation. We are supplying the Research Foundation with a $1 million budget and a scope of work of the commission.
Okay, so the answer
Through
is
March 31 of this year
through March 31 of this year.
is
No.
not necessarily.
No, that is not.
No,
That is not. It's a $1 million
$1 million
grant.
budget.
The contract, which we have not seen, could put an expiration date on that, but I do not believe it will. So it's for a $1 million grant. It does not end the fiscal year, March 31st of 2021.
Okay, so it would make sense to me, speaking as a single commissioner, that we do one thing immediately, that we propose a scope of work that includes your salaries and the expenditures that we believe we will incur to the end of this fiscal year. That would be March 31, 2021, and going into the next budget year. If this is a one-year contract, you're frowning, Doug. If this is a one-year contract, then we've got to submit to them something that covers a year's grant. And my recommendation is that we do it in those two steps, the end of this fiscal year and the beginning of next fiscal year.
My apologies, I wasn't trying to frown, Commissioner, but what I would say in the way it was explained, you're not really operating on a fiscal year. The fiscal year would be the request of an additional appropriation, which would then be in a form of a grant to the Research Foundation. Again, we're dealing with $1 million. Move the fiscal year out of it. We have to spend the $1 million and then go get an additional grant for additional appropriation for us to operate.
Okay, understand. And the moment you said appropriation, I understood that the first time.
Okay.
My question to you then is, well, actually, it's not a question, it's a statement to my colleagues. I think what we need to do ASAP is develop a scope of work that covers from now until appointment to the end of this fiscal year, and then an additional X number of months, depending on what Doug and Karen tell us is the plan of the Department of State and the Research Foundation. Do you think, because the scope of work is not likely to change. Their job descriptions are not going to change. The work that we have to do is only going to amplify over the course of the next 12 months, 18 months, but it will not change, if you will. So I think that we are advised to do that ASAP. What do you think? Anyone?
I'd like to hear from our exec directors. What do you think of that way to proceed?
I'll give you my view, and Karen, you can certainly chime in. Karen and I have been discussing our scope of work is really the constitutional amendment, state constitution and the executive law. So deviating from that would be a mistake, but I certainly think if more detail is needed, that would be dictated based on that $1 million budget that we're putting together. So I believe that the scope of work should be, and I think Karen and I agree on this, that it should be the constitutional amendment, because that is what we're here to do.
Will this $1 million budget be based on what you've been working on for the budget that we had been talking about, that we talked about, like the $3 million that we were going to request?
So the immediate needs is what that $1 million would go to. That would be salaries for staff, the question of the commissioner's compensation and how that's going to be handled, along with getting us the proper tools and infrastructure, website, computers, operations. There's also some fringe benefits that are associated with this. So it has moved us to revisit our budget, but that's what we're going for immediate needs with this $1 million along with staffing. Karen, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. I have nothing to add.
Can I just suggest that perhaps rather than scope of work, just to piggyback on Commissioner Frazier's concern, and I share it, is perhaps you can, the executive directors can put together a budget for 3 months. That's really it, January, February, and March. That is the staff hires, the expenses we're going to have to incur, the website development, the 3 months, and the $1 million, with the anticipation that the state's budget is going to include an appropriate sum April 1st forward for us to actually complete our work. So rather than a scope, maybe just a budget for the next 3 months that has us taking on all the initial costs, the website development, finding office space, and obviously staffing, so we can begin this process, understanding that on April 1st, I fully expect that the state is going to properly fund the commission so that we can do the balance of our work for the balance of this year.
Thank you. I can accept that clarification. That works.
All right.
Okay.
So I think that would be excellent, Karen and Doug, if you could put that together. And I agree with Commissioner Martins. I think that's a necessity for us to proceed.
Okay.
Anything else on this topic, commissioners, Karen and Doug?
Is there any inkling as to whether or not, I guess, state or SUNY will pick up some of the non-personnel costs, such as space, rent, IT infrastructure, or we're waiting to see what's literally on the page when that draft comes to us?
They will be taking a grant management fee. And part of that will include some of those services. We don't have an exact list of what they're going to be providing, but they will provide some administrative support.
Contract management.
At a fee.
Right.
Yes.
And a fee.
Right. I think it's usually around maybe 10, somewhere between 10, 12.
It will be 10%.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Get a bargain.
So our ask to the state just went up by 10 points. Again, our numbers don't change. And so if there's an administrative cost that they've placed on the commission as a result of how they've arranged for us to be funded, obviously that has to be tacked on as well.
I'll add to that, Commissioner. It also depends on how employees would be set up in fringe benefits as well. So, there's some work that Karen and I have to work on and come back to you with.
Excellent. Anything else on this issue, commissioners, co-executive directors?
Anyway,
Karen.
we approach that draft our way in an expeditious manner here. We're waiting on this draft. We were supposed to get it last week, I believe.
As soon as they are done negotiating the terms, I was told they would send the draft to us.
The other component is Karen and I were informed that we have to put together that scope and budget, which I believe is part of that contract. So we are moving expeditiously. So as soon as we get that, supply that to them, that draft should come shortly thereafter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I only have, sorry, go ahead.
I'd just like to make the point, and this is more for the record, that this work should have been going on last March, April, so that 10 years from now, when the next commission is needed to do the same job, the legislature and those that are in place at that point recognize that this has not been the way to do it.
Yeah, Commissioner Nesbitt, I agree with that. And I think that the California Commission in 2010 put together a postmortem, effectively looking forward. And it's a very interesting read. I highly recommend that every member of the commission look at it. And I think if it's not too much to ask, our co-executive directors, if you could just kind of keep bullets going forward, like Commissioner Nesbitt said, so that we can put together a postmortem at the end of this process. And so to inform our successors in 2030, what mistakes to avoid and how to improve their processes. So commissioners, anything else on this topic that we would like to discuss?
Just one question, which is, will we have the opportunity to discuss the contract in a meeting prior to it being executed? I just heard of this concept moments ago of an unspecified fee. I don't know what else is going to be in there that's going to merit discussion, even if we don't have the ability practically to veto it. We may want to make some expression of displeasure, disapproval, or commentary on elements of the contract. I don't know what other people think of that.
Well, Commissioner Flatel, you have experience with this from the CUNY system. I mean, 10% seems extremely high to me, but is that just to be expected?
No, it's not. If it's at 10%.
Not actually. No.
Oh, no. Okay.
No.
Yeah, it can be higher.
Okay.
And for some university professors, it has been 15%. For some projects, it has been 15, 20, depending on what they require the research funds to do. That fee can get much higher than 10%. So understand from their perspective, they may have given us what they consider a bargain basement price. What I think we have to do is that we've got to jump ahead of this train, ask Karen and excuse me, David, to send us excuse me, the drafts as soon as we can get them. We read them and we expedite our review and get back to Karen and then move forward. Is that fair? So we aren't the drag on the process, but we are involved and we do read this in advance of negotiating an agreement. Does that seem fair, Karen? I don't want to speak for Doug, but Karen, do you think that's reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. That's fine.
All right, good, thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner Barnes. Yeah.
I am loath to have any contract negotiated by 12 people. I think we should be very careful of that. I don't mind reviewing it. I certainly don't mind reading it, but let's all make a commitment that we have two co-executive directors who have been appointed to do just this. And we can probably make some suggestions, but if we're going to negotiate this with each one of us taking an active role in negotiating the contract, looking for trouble and we're looking for delays, and that's not what this is about.
I agree with Commissioner Martins, if only because there are far too many lawyers on this commission already. So, so I agree with that. Anything, Commissioner Flatel, yes.
Yes, I would just ask that even on this first budget, we give significant weight to our public engagement initiatives. We are so far behind the clock right now, and we don't know how soon after April 1 that next round of funding may actually come our way. And we really need to get busy yesterday in terms of public engagement and outreach. So Doug and Karen, if you can keep that high on the radar as a component of even this first round budget we're working on, I think that would be a wise approach for our commission going forward. we need to signal that we're not just dealing with an administrative quandary here, but we're functioning, affirmatively in terms of what our responsibilities are.
I can support that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Agreed.
Anything else, commissioners? That we
Yeah, I would just
Yes.
like to, since we may not be together again before this letter emerges, so as not to be caught between a timing issue, I would like to re-emphasize Commissioner Martin's point that whatever budget is submitted to the governor with respect to the executive budget, that it reflect a gross up for any percentage that is being claimed by the research foundation, so that the commission is in the same effective position that it would have been.
Karen and Doug, I agree with that. Do you account for the costs that theoretically might be covered by the 10%? Did you account for office space or anything in the budget?
We did not get a confirmation
Okay.
that we're going to get office space for that.
Okay.
Yeah, we did account for office space in our initial projection, but we were informed on the employee side, our fringe benefit was off significantly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
It was low, right?
way low.
Very, yeah,
Yeah, I told you
Okay.
30%, right? Isn't it closer to 20?
it's higher.
It's high, it's way higher. It's double
Higher.
that.
Wow.
Okay. So if you could adjust accordingly, that would be excellent.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this issue, commissioners? Karen and Doug, do you have any additional updates that you want to provide us on any subjects? So then the next issue that we wanted to have on the agenda was the concept of public engagement and how we wanted to approach that. I think the first question that we had was whether we wanted to conduct a second round of hearings. The state constitution requires us to put out a plan. I think September is the absolute deadline, and then requires us to then have hearings after the plan is put out to the public. I believe that, and I would be interested in hearing what my fellow commissioners think about this, that it is necessary to have a round of hearings prior to our even putting pen to paper and starting to draw the lines. I think it's necessary to get public input before we start to actually draw lines, because otherwise I think we will be blind in the dark if we do not try to solicit public input. So I would propose having a number of roundtables. The state constitution lays out a series of cities and counties in which we have to have hearings. I think that potentially that would be a framework that we could follow and have, in the county, in Brooklyn, having one hearing in the spring and then having another hearing after we put out our initial plan. But I wanted to put this out to the commission for your thoughts on this issue. Commissioner Brady.
I would 100% concur with that. I don't think we can put out a plan without having the public input first. It goes to the integrity of the plan that we put out and what it encompasses and what information we used as an independent redistricting commission. So I wholeheartedly support a round first, getting as much information as we can, being as transparent and open to the public as we can, formulating an intelligent plan that takes in as much of that information as we can, explaining it, and then putting it out there again for response before it's finalized and sent forward.
Commissioner, I quite frankly am pleased and relieved to hear you say that, because I do believe our credibility is at stake as well. And the more information we can gather in as open a fashion as we can gather it, the better off we will be when it comes to the time of actual drawing and actual quote unquote engagement over map making. We have potential allies out there who want to engage in a participatory process. And I think that our next step as commissioners, while our esteemed staff is going after our budget, I think we need to sit down and map out our scope of work on public engagement and how we plan to accomplish those goals. And I think that it is actually a lower cost activity because we have people who want to work with us and are kind of knocking at the door saying, are you guys ready yet? Are you guys ready yet? So I'm all in, ready to rock when you're ready to rock. And I think that at least there's one other commissioner who agrees with me. So let's go. Let's start this. Let's put our plan together. Okay.
Agreed.
The trick is not just to go out to those people who want to engage with us, is to actually go out there and get those people who have no idea who we are and empower them to engage with us as well. I'm going to be somewhat skeptical of the people who are waiting at the door to participate because there may already be an interest in place that they want to encourage us to pursue. So I agree with you, Commissioner Frazier, wholeheartedly, and Brady. I think we have, there's a lot of outreach out there, but forgive me if I'm going to be more skeptical for those who are lining up to try and encourage us to a certain course of action. I want to make sure that we reach out to people who would not ordinarily participate or engage, and make sure that they have a voice and that their voices are actually heard as part of the process equally. But what I would also, I just caution everyone, we don't have a structure yet. We're 10 individuals and 2 executive directors who are on this commission. And until we have our staff in place, until we have a structure to be able to move and execute, until we have a website, until we have a communications platform, we have a bunch of wishes, all of us, and we should articulate that, move that forward. But I do think that it may be premature for us to begin discussing how we're going to do that in particular now, until we actually put and have our staff structure, offices, our ability to actually host Zoom calls like this, a website, all of the things that we would need to have as a commission in order to actually be able to receive that information and process it. So I'm all in, whatever the commission majority wishes to do, but I would like to see the commission constituted, that is the staff and the work in place and the budget in place before we take the next step of active engagement, because we also need to process that information beyond our own personal wants and desires.
I agree, Commissioner Martins, but I also think that we are very much building an airplane in midair at this moment, and that we have to be working on all possible angles. So I definitely agree that a budget and getting funding and getting staff is our #1 priority. But I also think that it helps us in the commission to get input from the public if we agree now whether we are going to have 2 rounds of hearings or 1 round of hearing. But I completely agree with you, Commissioner Martins. Commissioner Nesbitt, you.
Yeah, I also agree with Commissioner Martins, and fine with the idea of additional hearings. I have special concerns, as an upstate rural person, that we get the rural point of view involved here as well. But I am very concerned that we not do any substantial work until we're able to record our work and appropriately save and manage the information. We have an obligation to make a record of all our work, and if we were to move forward now, we do not have that ability. So what Commissioner Martins said is very appropriate, because we need the staff, the computer space, all of the things that go along with that will come along with the movement of money from the budget into the commission in order to appropriately do our job. If we were to move forward now, take in information, even make important decisions about particular hearings, whatever, without being able to record our reasoning and create that public record, we'd be causing a problem for ourselves in the long run. So, I think we've been harping away on this budget stuff. The budget stuff is simply gives us the ability to create a mechanism to appropriately do our job. And I think
I agree that that the budget is necessary for us to be able to do this work. However, I would say that we should not allow the lack of a budget right now stop us from making plans for the work that is necessary. I have high hopes that we will have access to our budget soon, or at the very least, by the time the census data becomes public, hopefully by April, and that once we have we and the public have access to the census data, we can start the process of soliciting public input. And I think that we can have meaningful conversations about what the format of the hearings is going to be like, how these hearings will proceed. How are we going to reach these underrepresented communities or difficult to access communities? And I think that these are conversations that we can continue to have as we set up our infrastructure, so that once we do have access to our budget, we are ready to take action. So that's my view.
And by way of I don't disagree with your thinking, except we have a responsibility to keep certain records under state law. And we do not have the ability to keep them. Until that ability exists, including our decision-making about format and additional meetings and any other important decision that the commission makes, we would be, I believe, in violation, or certainly by omission. So I'm not interested in violating our state law or abrogating that responsibility because of the slowness of receiving this funding. But in fact, I think it's totally inappropriate for us to do anything meaningful unless we can record it for posterity because we are required to do so.
No, and I agree with you, Commissioner Nesbitt. And I think that, as Commissioner Cuevas Molina said, at the earliest, we're potentially looking at these hearings after the census data comes out, right? So, but I think that it will be very useful for our co-executive directors to know that on our priority list for, fairly soon, I mean, this is only 2 or 3 months from now, to be able to have Zoom capabilities that would allow us to have public hearings, right? The California Commission, actually, in the postmortem we were discussing, they said that their number one challenge was public engagement and getting public input, and that was what consumed the vast majority of their time. And they actually came up with this elaborate system where every single piece of correspondence, every single person who testified at a hearing had a specific number and was recorded for posterity. And I think that I completely agree with you that we have no choice. We must have a similar system, not just for ourselves and not just for our own ability to take in input and to organize it and use it in an efficient and effective manner, but also for the public and for the, because they will be looking to us and looking for reasons why our proposal lines went the way they did. Commissioner Wofford, I'm sorry, I think I interrupted.
No, not at all. Look, I agree with the oft expressed sentiments that we need to have active public engagement. It occurs to me that many of these comments feed into the concept of discussing a public engagement plan. I think that it is very clear that it cannot be merely the groups that have the most immediate proximity or the loudest voice, but rather a procedure that will result in comprehensive and balanced and informed input and ideally dialogue between the commissioners and those presented. And so that does require infrastructure. It requires some forethought about the geographic and perhaps other parameters that will govern the engagement and make it balanced and representative. And so I think we probably need to talk about the parameters of an engagement plan through perhaps a draft from our executive directors, because we do have a lot of competing interests. We have a limited calendar and limited time, notwithstanding that we want the maximum possible balanced input from the community.
I agree with that, Commissioner Wofford. If we could ask, would there be any objection from the commission in asking our co-executive directors to begin putting together such a draft?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
In part because we've already asked our executive directors to be the lead people and the point people in negotiation of their own salaries, be the lead people and point people in negotiation with the state of New York and the Research Foundation. They got a lot on their plate right now. I think it is reasonable for us who said yes to this task to take it upon ourselves to at least brain dump, either in the form of a memo that we circulate to each other and then discuss in an open meeting like this. We spent 3 meetings talking about budget. We can spend a public meeting talking about our own individual thoughts on public engagement. I think we need to own this particular brain dump and throw ourselves into it, because we all had reasons why we said yes. And I think we need to disclose to the best of our ability what our reasons, what our methodology was, what our thinking was, what we learned, and put it on the record. I don't know what California did to get the brains of their commissioners out on a piece of paper, but I would suggest that we have a substantial bank here of experience, practice, etc. And I think we need to share it with each other. And if this Zoom that is controlled by the Senate is the place we do it, I think we need to set up a meeting that is specifically organized around getting our brains out in a collective manner about what we think the targets ought to be, all that stuff. Put as much energy into getting our brains out for public engagement as we have putting our brains together on the question of how do we get this money done, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. So that is my suggestion, that we put our brains on this, because you all, I know you have all, see, you realize, see, you got to laugh. I know that you have another self. There's the public self. You all have a public self. You've got a community self. I keep bumping up into it every time I turn around. I'm bumping up into George Winter's community self. Okay, I know it exists. So it's time for us to take our community selves and our community knowledge and put it out here and say, these are all the places we need to go, all the places we need to talk to, our capacity, our volunteers, our, whatever, and come together with the first brain dump on a public engagement plan. It will buy Karen and Doug time to do the ookie work, my word, legal word, with the Research Foundation and the state and the Department of State. We do the other work here, the brain dump work, in getting the initial thoughts out on what does public engagement mean, what resources individually, collectively, yada, yada, do we bring to it, what goals and objectives, and we put our brains on a piece of paper and we share it. And we can do it in an open meeting like this, where we have people who've been waiting for us to do this, sitting in the wings on a Zoom, wondering if we're ever going to get here. We start by having a meeting just like this. And I suggest it's our next meeting. We do our brain dump. The people who talk to us, haven't talked to us, the rural folks made themselves known to Mr. Nesbitt in the beginning. I think that's one of the first things I remember about Mr. Nesbitt. Somebody asked, well, is somebody going to be paying attention to rural areas? We need to respond to that assertively and talk about how and ask for their help. That's what I think. I'm done now.
Well, could we take that a step? This format, the Zoom format we're using, and I guess our executive or Mr. Namor, Mr. Wolford, and any of you, please, this format, to what you're saying, can be used for other people's input, or at least to record what we're thinking about what we're doing, or give some people an opportunity just to weigh in, or get on a sort of, I guess, like the city council or a legislative body sets an agenda. People sign up and they come say what they want to say, and at least they get heard. We have some kind of a public record that while we don't have everything set up yet, we're letting people speak. They can't, there are no decisions to be made. It's just opening the process and letting some people know that, as Commissioner Martin says, letting some other people know that, hey, we're out there. We're started, at least with this baby step. We've started. We're out there. We're doing this. Come join us. Come be heard. And, and hey, let's make sure we're funded so that we can go out and do this right and continue the process of opening the public hearings. Maybe it's a good way to get exposure. And that's my 2 cents.
I agree with what's been said, particularly Commissioner Brady and Commissioner Frazier. We have to multitask here. We can't avoid the public engagement process. We're talking about building towards it, not doing anything that's going to step over a line. But we have to put a consensus ideas. As is pointed out, there were 10 commissioners here. So we're going to need consensus among ourselves as to how we're going to proceed. So that means we have to dialogue, communicate with one another. That doesn't mean that there'll be a set of meetings, next month. It might be 2 months. But I think we need to get the process going as commissioners so that we have a consensus plan that reaches all corners of our great empire state here: rural, urban, upstate, downstate, racial and ethnic groups, communities of interest. It's a conversation, and we need to structure that conversation. But also to Commissioner Brady's point, I served on the New York City Board of Elections for several years. And at the end of every meeting, when we finished our official business as commissioners, we literally had an open mic where members of the public, there were rules of engagement. They had 2 minutes where they could get on that microphone, say what they had to say, ask questions. We didn't have to respond, but at least they had the opportunity to put issues, concerns, recommendations that they had on the record. And then we just proceeded. So I think we've been meeting now since September. Commissioner Brady's concept of an open mic, I'll use that term, I think is a next layer we could add to our regular commissioners meetings. So that's a form of public engagement right there. And at the same time, while our key co-executive directors are ironing out our administrative resource questions, we can at least dialogue amongst 10 commissioners and come up with a consensus, broad consensus about how we're going to proceed with the public engagement component. We can't delay much longer because we're already almost a year behind the clock as far as getting our constitutionally mandated work done here.
Thank you, Commissioner Flotow. Does anyone have any other thoughts on this? I mean, I think I agree with everyone's views that public engagement is essential, right? And this is the first time that the state has ever had a process like this. And I think if we are truly committed to having voters, allowing voters to choose their representatives and not letting politicians choose their own their constituents, we need to get going on this. So any additional thoughts on this? I think that Commissioner Frazier's plan is a good one, right? This is a iterative process. I don't think we need to make any decisions right here, right now.
Right.
But should
We're
we
not making decisions.
Commit to having a large portion of our next meeting discussing the exact contours of public engagement, recognizing that, as Commissioner Nesbitt said, that all logistical issues must be addressed. And I do think though that planning this together will also help inform the structure that Doug and Karen are helping build, right? I think that, we've talked a lot about public engagement, but we need to help Karen and Doug figure out what we want and how we want to implement this process.
And can we have an open mic segment built into our meetings at some point in the very near future, if not our next meeting, say by the following meeting where the public knows. They do it at the MTA board meetings. I know I'm sure there are other governmental bodies where that is a formal, literally back end of a formal meeting of a governmental body where they allow the public briefly to express their opinions, put information on the record. I'd like to see us move in that direction as well.
Can we check to see technologically whether that's possible first, Commissioner Flito? Yeah, I think that.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
And then equally as important, what are the rules of engagement?
Right.
What will they be able to speak to? If we're going to have an open mic, I think it's important that it be specific to this process, to redistricting, to identifying communities of interest, and it not be used as a forum for anything beyond, what the purpose of this commission is. That's all.
May I ask a question?
Well, whoever controls the mute button can make sure that happens.
Are we required to give an agenda to this meeting in advance when it's posted? I'm not really good on this.
So I think this goes to our governance question. We do not have a chair, and we do not have a formal structure yet for the commission. And I think ideally, California does an excellent job of this. They put out formal agendas prior to their meetings. I think that thus far that has, we put out the notice that Doug and Karen prepare, but I think that thus far it hasn't been necessary to do that, frankly, because we haven't had the ability to do anything to a certain extent. But yes, I mean, I think ideally I would want to be able to establish agendas as a commission, put those agendas out to the public to signal what we're talking about at these meetings. And then also ideally solicit public input. I mean, I think Commissioner Flateau is right. To the extent that we can have folks come and talk at our meetings, I think that would be excellent. My only concern is, as Commissioner Martin said, that we need to kind of have a narrow, we need to establish a scope, right? We don't want to have people coming to this meeting to talk about, their individual lines in their individual municipality if we are already going there and having a hearing focused on Rochester or Queens or Brooklyn, right? So I think I think this would be established by our public engagement strategy if we could lay out to the public a timeline and say, this is when we would want input on this issue versus, come to our meeting and give us your thoughts, right? Because there are so many elements of this process. And I think that it would be useful to the public to delineate when and what we want to know. The California Commission put together a flyer where they said at their hearings, this is what the community of interest is. It would be extremely helpful to us if you could delineate, if you are coming to speak on behalf of a community interest, if you could delineate what that community of interest is, where are they geographically, what are their characteristics economically, socially, racially, and lay that out. So I think that to the extent that we do open up to public input, I think we need to provide as much guidance to the public as possible in order to make this as efficient and effective. Yes, Commissioner.
So Commissioner Imamura, that is why I spoke initially of a public engagement plan, because I think there are a number of issues to make this run right and effectively and comprehensively and get that input, that we need to have some sort of framework. And I am perfectly happy having that resolved among the commissioners, but I do think we need some starting point or straw man, because frankly, I want input that's grassroots and not input that's astroturf, among other issues. And so I renew my initial request that we have to have some sort of starting point for this discussion.
Can we start with, giving the commissioners a set of questions? What does public engagement look like to you? Who are the people that you want to speak to if you have specific interest groups in mind? And maybe that each of us also come up with ideas of what we want that input to look like. What do we want to receive from the public and in what format, so that we can have some kind of structure to the discussion that we're going to be having in the near future, you know, in order to have this public engagement plan that Commissioner Wofford is speaking of.
Commissioner Nesbitt.
I think this goes to the rules idea. And well, that was, you know, we didn't get very far with that. But by way of background, I was president and commissioner at the Division of Tax Appeals Tribunal. And I'm very experienced in understanding the appropriateness and effectiveness of having rules. And that means if someone gives verbal testimony, how long does it last?
Right.
Submitting written testimony, what the you know, the subject matter appropriateness, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it would be beneficial as part of this process to delineate those rules in such a way that makes our work effective and not, you know, that we focus on our job, not on what someone thinks is our job, if you're getting what I mean.
Right.
Gets before us. So I think that's something that we could work on. The other thing is that I think it's very appropriate for us on our own time to work through our executive directors. They can be the gathering point for our ideas and our thoughts and ideas on all of these subjects because they're going to be working full time on this as none of the rest of us are. And thirdly, David, if you could share links to the California information.
Yes, I will distribute that. Yes,
I
Commissioner.
think that would be helpful.
Yeah, there's also a law journal article that specifically looks at the California public engagement, what they did. So I will forward that as well.
David, does California have a set of rules by which their commission or bylaws under which their commission operates?
That I don't know. I think I have not dug that deep into the 2010 California Commission
I'm pretty
website.
sure they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a number of documents sitting on that website. I'm pretty sure they have some operating guidelines.
Because as Charlie, we certainly want to have a procedure where we're taking public input, where we don't degenerate into chaos.
Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree with that.
We have to have the ability to rein people in if we need to. I mean, not hopefully we don't, but at the same time, we have our own precious time to deal with, and as a result, it would be nice to have a set of guidelines for which people operate. They do that even in legislative hearings, no matter where you are. You have.
Yeah.
We have to have rules establishing how we're going to take public input.
Yeah, as Commissioner Flateau said, I think it comes down to who controls the mute button. But yes, I completely agree with you, Commissioner Winter.
That could be abused as well. So
without disenfranchising somebody. Right.
Yes.
That won't happen in this body.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, we also have to recognize that while early on we're talking about Zoom and other electronic means, we may actually have physical hearings later in the process. So we need to think through all of those rules.
Yes. Yeah, and I think, frankly, I think that is, if there is any silver lining to our Zoom age, it is the ability to do many hearings quickly without issue, right? I mean, if we're talking about doing hearings in April, I think that we could easily do hearings in every single geographic location that the state constitution requires, via Zoom without any problem, right? Whereas if we were crisscrossing the state, it would be more difficult for us to be able to do as many hearings as we might like. So I think that we can, if anything, maximize the amount of public input we get by having more Zoom events versus having to do everything in person.
I agree.
Yeah.
The only concern, and I I don't know that if you're on a platform such as this, you can distinguish geographically where people are coming from and participating, and the need to make sure that we're hearing from people in that geographic area is important.
Yes.
It goes to the very purpose of those hearings being specifically in those locations. And so, you know, although I do think we need to maximize our use of technology as much as possible, we also need to figure out ways of narrowing the scope so that we are actually hearing from the geographic areas that that are listed and others, because that's the only way we're going to have a true understanding of the needs of that particular geographic area and not have it influenced by people who are participating from other parts.
I would propose that we do a call for public input that specifies this hearing will be for X region, and that we, you know, weed out those possible participants that may not be representative of the region, and that we have maybe a set of pre-scheduled participants and then have an open mic at the end. That might be helpful in achieving what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I agree. We need to establish some kind of rule set, and I think it goes to what Commissioners Winter and Commissioners Nesbitt have said. So we don't have to. We certainly don't have to make these decisions today. But so in terms of next steps, Commissioners, I think Commissioner Frazier's idea is a good one for everyone to consider, to think about this and think about how we want to go about approaching this. Should we schedule another meeting and put this on the agenda? So
Yes.
we had so we had previously been doing Thursday meetings, and then we moved to Tuesday because of the holidays. Do we want to stick with Tuesdays or move back to Thursdays?
I'd like to move back to Thursdays.
Okay.
If that's
So
okay with everyone else.
I was gonna say stick to Tuesday.
Okay,
Down here.
whatever. I'll make room wherever, but let me know.
How about Thursday, the 21st? Or do people have a view as to whether that is
January.
Well, do we want to do earlier than that, Commissioner Wofford? I was going to propose Thursday, the 14th. You know, I know that we keep on scheduling these meetings saying, oh, we'll get the money before then, and then the money doesn't come in time.
Well, let me remember, January 19 is the budget submission day for the legislature. So that is a very seminal day for us as far as having some idea about how we're going forward. So I think that we should keep that in mind. It's time's flying here between now and January.
The exec budget will be released January 19, Commissioner Winter?
Yes, January 19th. And of course, the mechanical necessity of putting it together is not simple. And so to that extent, you know, we have to make sure that our oar is in the water well before that date.
Right. Maybe we need to meet next week.
Yeah, so I would propose meeting next week. Should we say Thursday, the 14th?
Sure.
And we had been meeting at 10 a.m. previously. Should we stick with that? Thursday, January 14th at 10 a.m.
Why not 2 o'clock? We
That's
can
not-
We can also go
do the
do-
last several meetings.
Yeah, we can also do 2
Yeah,
o'clock
let's
as
do
well.
2. And if we could do 2 o'clock on Thursday, that would be better for me. I have another 10 to Zoom meeting on that day.
Okay.
Thursday the
Does that work for everyone else, Commissioners?
Fine with me.
I won't be available that day. But
Oh, okay. Do we want to do Tuesday then?
The 12th?
I would make
Yeah, Tuesday 12th.
No,
Yeah.
no objection to the 12th.
So should we just do the same time a week from today?
sure.
Thursday the 12th,
Yeah.
2 o'clock.
Does that work out for everyone? So my concern about Tuesdays are that they are at the same time as the state legislature. They're in session. I don't know if that's problematic for like from the perspective of getting press coverage or anything like that. But I think it's just something to keep in mind. I defer to our former state legislators who are on this commission on whether that would be problematic for us to
Well,
be
I
at the
think
same
the
time.
problem would be whether or not the Senate technical people are going to be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not their highest priority.
I don't. Yeah. If that's a
On a
legislative
Tuesday, I don't think.
Eric, does that work for you? Tuesday at 2:00? Sorry to put you on the spot, Eric.
I would think not.
I think they're frantically checking their own calendars right now.
They are in session on that day,
Yes.
but not on that Thursday.
No.
Okay. Okay. Whoever is responding from our Senate IT folks, would this work for you otherwise? 2:00 on Tuesday?
The middle of the session.
So they are saying that Thursdays are better.
Yeah.
And they cover all session. Okay. So should we stick with, okay. Karen, is the legislature in session on Wednesday?
I don't think so this week.
Okay, yeah, the 13th. Commissioner Cuevas Molina, does that work for you, Wednesday?
In truth, I won't be available to meet next week.
Okay, no worries at all. Okay, so should we return then to Thursday at 2:00? That's what we were proposing.
Yep.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Tuesday at 2:00. Yeah, and I would propose, as Commissioner Frazier said, I agree with everyone that we should have our co-executive directors at some point put together a public engagement plan, but I also think that it would behoove us for us, the commission as a whole, to kind of discuss this more and kind of solidify our thoughts and then hand it off.
Second item,
yes, Commissioner Foto.
Per Commissioner Winter, I think we also need to lock down our executive budgets commission. If we haven't done it by then for the next fiscal year, we're only 1 week out before the governor's going to release his exec budget, and I think we want to be on the record, right?
I thought we had agreed at the beginning of the meeting that our executive directors would be putting together a letter to Division of Budget, so they have that proposal in writing ASAP.
Yes, that is what we agreed to.
I think we should.
That was the resolution that we
Well,
passed.
okay, then we can at least revisit the issue, see if there are any development
Absolutely.
or anything like that. So that's the reason I was suggesting that as the second item.
Yeah, I would think that we would by
Update.
next Thursday we're going to know whether they bothered to talk to us. I mean, if they didn't, I mean, I would assume that we'll have input back from DOB by next Thursday. Otherwise, we're not going to be in. Otherwise, we might as well face it that we're not into anything. We're not in the executive budget until then, maybe a 30-day amendment, or then
or a plan B or C or nuclear option, whatever that is.
We all quit.
Well, okay, we're going to resign en masse if we're not in that. But I mean, we need to have that conversation. That's the reason I said that should be a second item. We just don't want to fade off into, into the night here.
So
if we had an agenda, it would be budget, it would be engagement, and it would be model rules. So while we don't necessarily haven't agreed on what the organization is as a chair, maybe we can somehow put that out that that's what our next meeting is those are the things that we have to do in order to be alive at
Are you
all.
kidding me?
I agree with Commissioner Brady. It's a 3-item agenda. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
I agree with that as well.
Okay, it's a
Yes.
3-item agenda for the 14th.
All right.
Okay,
Yes.
So, yes. All right. So we have an agenda for the 14th. We had distributed a website outline. I think I see no need to discuss this as the full 10 commissioners, but just if you have any input on that, if you could please let us know. Any other issues that the commission would like to discuss? Karen and Doug, anything you would like to bring up?
Yeah, Commissioner Imamura,
Right.
with those 3
Yes,
items.
Commissioner Wofford.
That's a pretty lengthy sounding agenda. I actually would have a slight preference for Wednesday, the 13th, if we could do it, because I think that's going to be, that's a heavy lift.
So I agree with that. And I was actually looking at my calendar. I have a 3 o'clock call. Would it be easier, Commissioner Wofford, for you to move it earlier on Thursday, or do you want to entirely move it to Wednesday, 13th?
Wednesday would be incrementally better, but well, I'll take what I can get.
Eric, how is Wednesday, the 13th? Okay, it's good. So Wednesday, the 13th, should we say 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 13th? Does that work for everyone?
Works for me.
works for me.
It's fine.
Okay, does that, Commissioner Nesbitt, Commissioner Martins, does that work for you?
Fine.
Okay, great. So 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 13th. I think this emphasizes the need to have a regular meeting time going forward.
Aye.
Yes. But yes, all right. Any other issues that we would like to discuss discuss as a commission? All right, well, thank you all. Happy redistricting year again. And I look forward to see everyone on the 13th. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.